recognize the Vice Chair of the committee, Mr. DeSantis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses. You know, this targeting issue is obviously very concerning, but understanding the government being what it is, understanding human nature, you know, people are apt to abuse their power. What's even more concerning for me is that once you have an admission of that, once you have somebody taking the Fifth Amendment, there is zero interest in rectifying any of this. And what the IRS has done, what the FBI has done, the Justice Department, I mean, I agree with the witnesses. This is just a total sham, and the American people are not getting answers. Ms. Engelbrecht, you mentioned in your statement, but I just think it should bear repeating. You had 20 years in business, zero issues with any agencies. You file for King Street and for True the Vote for status, and you're visited by how many different agencies? Which ones? FBI?
The FBI, the IRS.
IRS?
Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
ATF?
OSHA.
OSHA.
And a Texas sort of branch of the EPA.
Now, and you've mentioned, I think, very eloquently that you're going to keep fighting, and I see that obviously. But when you have to deal with this, I mean, you have a business, you have other things, you're trying to impact the country in a positive direction. When you have to deal with these agencies like this, it makes you less effective in pursuing your message. It has to. Am I right in saying that?
It certainly gives one pause to think that there is interagency collusion against private citizens. It is the weaponization of government.
And do you think that people similarly to you may look at what happens to people who speak out, and they may just decide, look, I don't want to deal with that, and so I'm gonna just remain silent because I don't want to buy myself problems. In other words, this type of targeting can chill political speech. Do you think that that's true?
That's absolutely the case.
Ms. Gerritsen, what was the IRS asking you to provide? It seems like these were very invasive and intrusive questions.
They sent me a list of approximately 80 questions. It was an 8-page document. Some of the questions they asked, they wanted to know all of my members' names. They wanted to know volunteers' names.
Which, by the way, I mean, we already know Lois Lerner has disclosed for tax information that she got caught red-handed in an email. So this stuff's supposed to be confidential, but we know that a lot of times it's not kept confidential. So continue.
They wanted to have copies of every speech that was ever given. They wanted credentials of who those speakers were. They wanted to know if any of our members or volunteers were going to run for office, and if so, what office. Remember, this was the 2012 election cycle when we got this questionnaire. They wanted to know if they wanted to know any communications that I have had with any legislative body, even within my own representative. They wanted emails, phone contact. They wanted to know what I was saying to my legislators.
So I'll ask a similar question for you. Just seeing that, a lot of people getting involved in politics for the first time, you're seeing all these questions. Do you think that some people just look at that and say, I don't want to have to deal with this? In other words, does this cause some people to silence themselves?
Absolutely. We have a group in Alabama who said they got their letter and said, we're not going to do this. And they stopped.
Ms. Mitchell, do you agree with Mr. Sekulow, this idea that, oh, they were targeting everybody, liberal groups as well, you know, that is false in your judgment, correct?
Absolutely false. The records don't substantiate that, and I know that that's one of the things that people have been using since last summer as a means of trying to discredit or to thwart the investigation. I'll give you one example. There was a report that was released by published in USA Today last September, which was an internal IRS document that listed 162 organizations that were on the watch list or development list at the IRS. And I think the number that was calculated was 83% of them were conservative. I'll give you the example. This was a document prepared in November of 2011. King Street Patriots is listed on there with and it says on the report, likely approval. November of 2011, likely approval. Also on that list is one of the few liberal groups, Progress Texas, and references in the comments that this is an organization that appears to engage in anti-Rick Perry propaganda. November 2011. Fast forward, Progress Texas gets its tax-exempt status by May of 2012. King Street Patriots did not get its tax-exempt status until 2 months ago, after going through yet more rounds of questioning?
Thank you for that. I'm about at time, so I just want to ask Mr. Sekulow, what the administration is trying to do with the C4, is it safe to say that if that is in effect, that would disproportionately affect conservative groups? In other words, a lot of the labor unions and environmental groups would not be affected by that. Is that correct?
Correct, because a lot of those are exempt under different provisions of the Internal Revenue Code. But in that regard, and with regard to the questioning aspect of this and the chilling effect, which I think is, Congressman, what you're going after, we have a client, the pro-life organization, that is one of the ones targeted. The questions to them were so draconian in nature that this is asked, talking about the client's pro-life position. This is the IRS. The presentation of viewpoints or positions are unsupported by facts is a significant portion of the organization's communications. The facts that purport to support the viewpoint or positions are distorted. This is coming from an Internal Revenue Service agent. The organization's presentation makes substantial use of inflammatory and disparaging terms and express conclusions more on the basis of strong emotional feelings than of objective evaluations. And the approach used in the organization's presentation is not aimed at developing an understanding on the part of the intended audience or the readership because it does not consider their background or training in the subject matter. Who gave the IRS the authority to say this, and how is it that the President of the United States can say there's not a smidgen of corruption when the documents, by the way, some of these signed by Lois Lerner or Holly Paz? How could they possibly even say this? The thing I don't understand, Mr. Chairman, is as the President was making his statements, as members of this committee were making statements, we had the documents in our possession, and I know Cleta did as well, from offices all over the country, coast to coast. And the agents told our clients it was being managed out of Washington. And with the email that was released yesterday, we know how high up the chain. And I would urge the committee, when you start talking about associate chief counsels, divisional counsels, this is as high as it gets.
Well said. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.